Of the pre-sentencing trial. Let's cross now to our reporter Patricia Visagie, who's in Pretoria. Patricia, powerfully emotive testimony from Barry, going to have a resounding impact on the outcome of this trial, no doubt.
Well, certainly it's going to have a very strong impact. Of course, we saw today a testimony of a shattered man, a man who's telling the court that 3 years later, after his daughter was murdered, he's grappling to find closure. He's left distraught and, of course, devastated. But all he wants is justice. He wants Oscar Pistorius to pay for killing his daughter. But, of course, we need to get some legal analysis on the matter. So now I'm joined by, of course, Advocate Llewellyn Kaluas, who will take us through some of the nitty-gritties that came out in a court today. Advocate, of course, a very emotionally charged testimony by Reeva's father.
Yes, indeed. I do think that Barry Steenkamp's evidence was of paramount importance to the court. The judge cannot but ignore the rest of the proceedings as far as I'm concerned and concentrate on basically what Barry Steenkamp had to say to the court. All in all, I do think today was all in favor of the state. The state did what they were supposed to do. At long last, the victim and her family had their voice spoken in court as well. And who else and who better than the father of the deceased?
And of course, this was the ace card that the state needed. And as you have said, this is perhaps since the beginning of this trial, one of the most strongest testimonies that we have seen by far coming out.
Yes, that's exactly my sentiments on the matter. That was my evaluation of his testimony. He was to the point. He said it as it should have been said from the outset. I liked the way he testified. He was open to court. The court cannot ignore his evidence. 3 things stood out for me in his evidence. First of all, as you've correctly observed, the fact that he said they've forgiven Oscar Pistorius, but ultimately the punishment must fit the crime and he must pay for his crime. That is the one aspect. The second aspect, obviously, at some stage, he actually made a personal observation and said, as far as he was concerned, there should have been, or there was some kind of an argument between the parties. Now, obviously, he was immediately stopped by Garinel when he introduced that evidence, and indeed correctly also done by the state, because remember, we are bound by the parameters and the judgment already made by the Supreme Court of Appeal and the evidence that was proven in those instances. And then obviously in the third instance, what wasn't of importance was the fact where the money came in. You remember the settlement amount, the 6,500 rands that came into play, and he put it into perspective. He said actually he was disgusted, that was the words that he used, by the mere fact that money can actually be used in exchange for a person's life. Those 3 things came out paramount in his evidence. And
let's go back to the part where he actually said that he believes that an argument occurred between the two. And that goes back to the heart of the matter, what the state, came to argue in this court from the beginning. And that is why we're back here. It borders on the principle of dolus eventualis again.
Yes, as we all know, intention is the required form of guilt to be successful in a conviction of murder, and that is exactly what was found by the Supreme Court of Appeal as well. And yes, from the outset, Garinel made those observations, and today, once again, I do think Barry Steenkamp shares those sentiments.
And of course, yesterday, we heard a Professor Squalls talking about a broken man. A man who suffers from anxiety, who should not be sent back to prison. And today we hear the testimony of a father who's left shattered. Between the 2 testimonies, who do you think brought a stronger version of how they've been affected by the death of course, Reeva Steenkamp?
One should be careful to consider and to compare the 2 versions with one another, because obviously they were called for different reasons. But the court is expected to strike a balance between the state's version and that of the defense. All in all, remember, yesterday, Barry concentrated on the one pillar of the sentencing phase, namely the personal circumstances of the accused. But there are 2 other pillars as well, namely the interests of society and obviously the seriousness of the offence. And I think today we've actually had a version and concentrated more on the other 2 factors. Ultimately, it's the court's prerogative and expected of our courts to strike a fine balance between those three, because only once those three things are in equilibrium do we have a just sentence.
Now, Barry Steenkamp's disappointment with the fact that the defense actually used the financial aid that they had given to the Steenkamp family and not stuck to the fact that they had agreed that this should not be put in the public domain. The fact that he came to this court and he said, but they overstepped the line, they breached the agreement. What does this say about the defense?
Well, I do think it creates a bad taste in anybody's mouth. I'm sure the court also will frown upon that evidence, and to what extent it will have repercussions later on from an ethical point of view, that remains to be seen. But surely it leaves a bad taste. But there's another aspect that we should mention to the viewers out there. Remember, at some stage, Barry Steenkamp actually observed and requested the court's intervention to publicize the photographic material of Reeva Steenkamp's body. And that was a new line that I haven't expected, not even from the state side. It shows to what extent this family had to gone through trauma, anxiety, that the father is even willing, in the interest of society and a better future for everybody, to have pictures of his daughter, his deceased daughter, publicized all over the world.
And he backed that up by saying that he wouldn't wish this upon anyone.
That was his observation, correctly pointed out. Yeah, correct.
But of course, now we're moving towards another witness that will come and testify in aggravation of sentence. That hopefully will be the state's last witness, as they've already indicated, and that will happen tomorrow. They played their cards, very close to their chest. We're not sure exactly who might testify, but we know that it might be somebody that will give another emotional testimony. Advocate Gerry Nel already indicated that in court.
Yeah. Gerry Nel indicated to court he's going to call one more witness. Now, obviously, he's not necessarily bound by that observation. It's an open-ended prerogative of the state to call whoever they want and as many witnesses as they want, but on the assumption that he will stick to his undertaking to court. They will start tomorrow half an hour earlier, as already observed. And he said he's going to be an emotional witness. That's the reason why he decided not to call her this afternoon. He indicated it's a female person, and because he don't want the matter to stand overnight and that the matter run over until tomorrow morning. He wants to start the witness, finalize the chief examination as well as the cross-examination and re-examination and get it done with. So, difficult question. I know the next question will obviously be who I would call if it was my choice of witnesses. All in all, I do think my money would be on somebody of the stature of Gina Myers, maybe. I think she can be a paramount witness for the state as well, but obviously there are many others to choose from as well.
All right, thank you so much. Of course, Advocate Llewellyn Lewis helping us with some legal analysis here at the North Gauteng High Court as we conclude yet another day of the Oscar Pistorius resentencing hearing here today. Of course, tomorrow we continue with the matter, with the state expected to call their last witness in aggravation of sentence. We're not sure exactly who that person will be, but for now we know that it will be a woman, and it might be one of Reeva Steenkamp's best friends who will come and testify about the emotional impact that her death has had on them and how much they have suffered and how they feel the Paralympian should be punished for having claimed her life in the manner that he did. It's back to you in the studio.
Patricia Visagie coming to us there from the North Gauteng High Court, where day 2 of the Oscar Pistorius resentencing proceedings have been adjourned until tomorrow. We'll continue with our rolling live coverage of that hearing tomorrow right here on Channel 404, so do stay locked on to the SABC News channel. For now,